You pulled them last weekend. You pulled them the weekend before that. And somehow they're back. More of them. Bigger. Like they never left. Most gardeners spend years fighting weeds the hard way. Hands and knees. Hours every weekend. Money on sprays that barely work. But here's what the low-maintenance gardeners figured out. You don't fight weeds. You suffocate them. With plants so aggressive, so dense, so determined, that weeds never get the foothold they need. Today I'm counting down 7 ground covers that spread so fast and thick, they do the weeding for you. Some of these will shock you. One of them is basically unkillable. And the number 1 pick? I didn't believe it either, until I saw it in action. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to plant, and you may never pull a weed by hand again. Here's the thing nobody tells you about weeds. The weed is never the real problem. Bare soil is the problem. Every inch of exposed dirt is an open invitation. Wind drops seeds. Rain carries them in. And weeds are ruthless. They germinate faster, spread faster, and survive longer than almost anything you plant intentionally. The solution isn't more herbicide. It's less open ground. When the right ground cover moves in, dense, low, spreading outward in every direction. It blocks sunlight from reaching the soil, physically crowds out competition, and builds a living mat that weeds simply cannot penetrate. What you get? Cleaner beds, prettier spaces, less watering, less fertilizing, and entire sections of your yard that basically manage themselves. These aren't just pretty plants. They're biological weed suppressors. And we're counting down from least to most impressive, so the further we go, the better it gets. Let's start the countdown. Plant number 7. Creeping thyme. Number 7. And I want to start here because this one solves a problem most gardeners don't even realize they have. You know those thin strips of soil along a pathway? The edges of a walkway, the gap between stepping stones, the border where the lawn meets the beds? Those spaces look fine in photos. But in real life, they collect weeds constantly. Low, stubborn, ground-hugging weeds that are miserable to pull because they're right at the base of everything. Creeping thyme moves into those spaces and just takes them over. Completely. It grows barely 2 to 3 inches tall, spreading outward in soft, rounded mats that press themselves flat against the soil. The leaves are tiny, almost miniature, and they knit together so tightly that weed seeds landing on top of an established patch have nowhere to go. No light reaches the soil. No gap to root into. The weeds simply stop showing up. But here's what makes this one different from every other low-growing spreader on this list. Late spring arrives, and this plant does something you genuinely don't expect the first time you see it. It flowers. Completely. Wall to wall across every mat. Tiny pink-purple blooms so dense that the green almost disappears underneath them. A pathway edged in creeping thyme during peak bloom looks like something out of a European cottage garden. And it costs almost nothing to plant. Walk across it, brush against it, even just step near it on a warm afternoon, and it releases this soft, herbal fragrance. It smells like a kitchen garden, like something intentional and cared for. And you did almost nothing to make it happen. After that first bloom, it settles back into its low, spreading habit and just holds the ground quietly through summer, fall, even into winter and milder climates. It handles drought without drama. It actually prefers lean, rocky, or sandy soil. The kind that other plants struggle in. Give it full sun and good drainage, and it will outcompete weeds in those problem strips for years without asking for a single thing in return. What most gardeners never realize is that creeping thyme is also one of the best pollinator plants you can put in a low-maintenance garden. When it blooms, bees swarm it. Butterflies land on it. You're not just solving a weed problem. You're building a living habitat in a space that used to produce nothing but frustration and back pain. The payoff by year 2 is a pathway that looks deliberately designed, smells incredible in warm weather, and requires zero maintenance beyond the occasional light trim if it starts creeping somewhere you don't want it. Now, creeping thyme is perfect for tight spaces, edges, and pathways. But what about when the problem is bigger? A full sunny slope, a wide hillside baking in afternoon heat, a bank you've given up on entirely? That's a different problem. And the next plant is built for exactly that. Plant number 6, ice plant. There is a particular kind of frustration that comes from a sunny slope. You know the one. Dry soil, direct afternoon heat, weeds that somehow thrive under conditions that kill everything else you try. Ground covers that look promising in spring and then melt away by July. Bare patches that get worse every year no matter what you plant. Ice plant was designed for that exact situation, and the first time you see it in full bloom, it looks almost unreal. The foliage alone is striking, thick, fleshy, succulent leaves that almost seem to shimmer in direct sunlight. That's where the name comes from. They hold moisture inside, which is exactly why this plant thrives where others fail. But then summer comes, and the whole mat detonates in color. Daisy-like flowers. Electric magenta, deep purple, burnt orange, open up across the entire surface of the plant. A hillside covered in blooming ice plant doesn't look like a garden. It looks like something from the South African coast or the California cliffs, somewhere dramatic and windswept and purposefully wild. And underneath all of that, the weeds are completely gone. The mat is so dense, so low, so thoroughly rooted into the slope that there is no entry point. No light, no air gap, no loose soil for anything else to establish. It spreads steadily outward season by season, filling in bare areas and claiming new ground while you do absolutely nothing. In dry climates, California, the Southwest, Mediterranean-style zones, it barely needs water at all once it's established. It actually prefers the neglect. The more you leave it alone, the better it performs. Here's the part most people never consider. Ice plant has a naturally high moisture content in those fleshy leaves, which makes it genuinely fire retardant in dry climates. In regions where wildfire risk is a real concern, it's used deliberately as a defensive planting along slopes and property lines. So while it's suppressing your weeds and covering your hillside in color, it's also providing a layer of protection that most ornamental plants simply can't offer. That slope you've avoided for 3 seasons? 2 summers of ice plant, and it becomes the most visually dramatic corner of your entire property. Before we keep going, if you've ever looked at a weedy, bare patch in your yard and felt that specific kind of defeated frustration, where you've tried things and nothing sticks, hit the like button right now. It helps this video reach more gardeners who are dealing with the exact same thing, and it tells me this kind of content is worth making more of. Okay, back to the countdown. Because number 5 solves the problem that number 6 cannot, and if you have shade, this next one changes everything. Plant number 5, Pachysandra. Under a large tree is one of the hardest places to garden. The soil is full of competing roots. The shade is deep and consistent. Rain barely penetrates the canopy. Grass refuses to grow there. Most ground covers fail within a season. And what you're left with is that ring of bare, exposed, slightly embarrassing dirt around the base. The kind that collects leaves, grows the occasional stubborn weed, and makes an otherwise beautiful yard look unfinished. Pachysandra is the plant that ends that problem for good. It grows 6 to 8 inches tall, spreading in slow, steady waves outward from wherever you plant it. The leaves are dark, glossy, evergreen, arranged in neat whorls that give it an almost architectural quality. It doesn't look wild. It looks placed, intentional. Like someone who knew exactly what they were doing put it there. In early spring, small white flower spikes push up above the foliage. Delicate, subtle, easy to miss unless you're looking for them. But the real value isn't the flowers. It's what happens to that bare ground over 2 or 3 seasons as Pachysandra quietly, methodically covers every inch of it. Once it fills in, the canopy it creates is dense enough that virtually nothing grows through it. Weed seeds that land on the surface can't reach soil. Weed seeds already in the soil can't reach light. The area essentially goes dark for everything except the Pachysandra itself, and it thrives on that darkness. The deeper the shade, the more reliably it performs. What makes this plant genuinely impressive isn't just the weed suppression above the surface. The root system it builds below is dense enough to physically stabilize soil on slopes under tree cover. The kind of loose, root-riddled ground that erodes and shifts over time. It's doing visible work above ground and invisible work below it simultaneously. And it stays green. Through winter. Through deep cold. Zones 4 through 9. It holds its color and its coverage even when everything else around it has gone brown and bare, which means there is no window in early spring when the soil is exposed and vulnerable. While your other garden beds are waking up slowly and giving weeds their annual head start, the Pachysandra bed is already fully covered. Has been the whole time. That shaded corner under your biggest tree, the one you've been meaning to deal with for years? Plant Pachysandra this season. Walk past it next spring and realize you never have to think about it again. Plant number 4, creeping Jenny, 7 to 9 o'clock. Most ground covers ask for patience. You plant them, wait a full season, maybe 2, before they really start doing anything meaningful. Creeping Jenny does not work that way. Plant it in spring, and by midsummer, you can actually watch it moving. Stems trail outward along the soil's surface, rooting down as they travel, sending out new growth in every direction simultaneously. It doesn't creep so much as flow. Like something liquid finding its path across the ground, filling every gap, claiming every open inch with that unmistakable color. And the color is the thing. The Aurea variety, the one most gardeners reach for, is this luminous chartreuse gold that almost seems to generate its own light. Planted under dark shrubs, in a dim corner, along the shaded edge of a fence line, and it brightens the entire space without you adding a single other thing. Landscape designers use it specifically for this, to lift areas that feel visually heavy, gloomy, or forgotten. Weeds were thriving in those spots partly because nothing attractive was competing for them. Creeping Jenny moves in, and the whole mood of that corner shifts. By the second season, the mat it builds is dense enough that bare soil essentially disappears. The trailing stems layer over each other, root down continuously, and create coverage thick enough to block light from reaching the ground below. In a wet or consistently moist area, around a rain garden, along a low drainage strip, beside a pond, it spreads faster than almost anything else on this list. It genuinely loves conditions that frustrate other ground covers. Small yellow flowers appear along the stems in early summer. Nothing dramatic, but they add texture and a quiet charm to the overall effect. And through the growing season, that golden foliage holds its intensity, staying vivid even as summer heat settles in. One honest note here: in naturalized areas or near water features that connect to wild land, creeping Jenny can spread beyond where you intended. In a contained bed, a defined border, or a hardscaped urban garden, it performs exactly as promised. Just plant it with intention, and it rewards you completely. That soggy, weedy low spot that's defeated every other planting attempt? This is the one that finally works there. And it makes the problem area genuinely beautiful in the process. We're past the halfway point, and the plants coming up are the ones that genuinely change how people think about their yards. If you're finding this useful, if something in this video has already shifted how you're thinking about a problem spot, subscribe before we keep going. I put this kind of content out every week. Smarter planting decisions, fewer expensive mistakes, better results with less effort. The gardeners who find this channel early are the ones whose yards look completely different 12 months from now. Subscribe button is right there. Okay, number 3. Plant number 3, Liriope. Every garden has that one area with no clear identity. Too much sun for shade plants, too much root competition for grass, too dry in summer, awkward to edge, impossible to make look intentional. Most gardeners just mulch it and hope for the best, then spend the following spring pulling weeds through the mulch anyway. Liriope is what you plant when you are genuinely done experimenting. It grows in dark, arching straps of deep green foliage. Dense, clumping, almost grass-like, but tougher than any grass you've worked with. It spreads steadily outward through underground runners, filling bare ground without the aggressive chaos of a true spreader. The coverage it builds is tight and uniform. No gaps, no thin patches, no openings for weeds to exploit. Just a clean, consistent mat that holds the ground through whatever your climate throws at it. Then late summer arrives and Liriope does something most people don't expect from a utility plant. Flower spikes push up above the foliage. Purple, lavender, occasionally white, looking almost like grape hyacinth or miniature lavender. They're striking enough to stop people mid-walk. And after the flowers fade, small dark berries form along the spikes that birds feed on through fall and winter. One plant, 3 seasons of visual interest. But the reason serious gardeners keep coming back to Liriope has nothing to do with the flowers. It stays green through winter. Fully, reliably, evergreen in zones 5 through 10, which means the soil beneath it is covered and protected every single month of the year. No dormant window. No bare soil exposure in late winter when early weed seeds are already germinating. The mat is always there, always working, even when the rest of your garden has gone completely dormant. Full sun to full shade. Clay, compacted soil, drought, coastal humidity, heavy foot traffic along edges. Liriope handles all of it without drama. There is almost no bad placement for it, which is genuinely rare in a ground cover. Before number 2, I want to hear from you. Where is the worst weed situation in your yard right now? A shaded strip under a tree? A baking sunny slope? A wet corner that defeats everything you plant? Drop it in the comments and tell me what zone you're gardening in. I read everything down there, and your specific situation might become a future video. Because the next 2 plants we're covering, they're in a different category entirely. One of them is so aggressive it's actually regulated in certain states. And the number 1 plant on this list? It does something in spring that I still haven't seen any other ground cover match. Plant number 2, English ivy. There is a particular kind of weed problem that breaks gardeners down completely. Not the weeds in a flower bed. Not the ones along a pathway. The ones on a steep, exposed slope, baking in summer, eroding in heavy rain, completely inaccessible to kneel on without sliding, where every attempt at planting something useful ends the same way. A season of false hope followed by bare soil and weeds again. English ivy was solving that problem long before most modern ground covers existed. Watch it work over a full growing season and the experience is almost unsettling. It moves with intention. Long trailing stems extend outward from the base of the plant, reaching across bare soil, pressing down, rooting at every node as they travel. Within a single season, it can cover ground that would take other spreaders 2 or 3 years to reach. By the second year, the mat it builds has multiple layers, stems crossing over stems, roots anchoring in every direction, until what you're looking at isn't just a ground cover. It's a dense, interlocking surface that holds soil in place, blocks every photon of light from reaching the ground below, and leaves absolutely no functional space for weeds to exist. The visual is classic for a reason. Those deeply lobed, dark green leaves, glossy, structured, architectural, don't just suppress weeds, they make a space look cared for. Old stone walls, shaded slopes behind outbuildings, the steep bank beside a driveway. Ivy transforms all of those from eyesores into features. In winter, when the rest of the garden has collapsed into brown and bare, established ivy holds its color and coverage completely. There is no off-season, no window of vulnerability. It simply never stops. Now, this is the part that actually matters, and I want to be direct about it because most content about English ivy skips this entirely or buries it at the end as an afterthought. In naturalized areas, forests, wild margins, parks, green corridors, anywhere that connects to unmanaged land, English ivy escapes. It climbs trees and eventually shades out their canopy. It spreads into native plant communities and outcompetes everything. It is invasive in many parts of the United States and the United Kingdom for exactly this reason, and in some regions it's actively prohibited. Those regulations exist because of real ecological damage, not overcaution. But here's what the conversation around invasive plants almost always misses. The problem is placement, not the plant itself. In a contained urban garden, a hardscape bed with clear physical boundaries, a managed slope surrounded by pavement or structures, English ivy performs exactly as intended, and the risk of escape is negligible. Thousands of gardeners use it responsibly in exactly those conditions every single year. The mistake isn't planting ivy. The mistake is planting it without thinking about where it can and cannot travel. Know your site. Check your local regulations. Give it a boundary it cannot cross. Do those 3 things, and you have access to one of the most powerful weed-suppressing ground covers ever put in a garden. That impossible bank. That shaded slope behind the fence that you have genuinely given up on. English ivy takes it in a season and holds it indefinitely. The work is almost entirely in the decision, not in the maintenance that follows. But here's what I need you to stay for. Everything we've covered up to this point, the fragrance, the color, the shade tolerance, the sheer aggression, the number 1 plant on this list does something none of them do. Once a year, it produces a display so completely unexpected for a ground cover that people genuinely stop their cars to look at it. And it does this while holding ground more cleanly, more reliably, and more beautifully than anything else on this list. Number 1 is coming right now. Plant number 1, creeping phlox. I want you to picture a specific moment. Early April. The morning light is still soft. You walk outside and there's a slope in your yard, or a rock wall, or a long sunny border, and it is completely, entirely, impossibly covered in color. Not scattered blooms. Not a few flowers dotting green foliage. Every square inch of the plant is flowering simultaneously. Pink, lavender, white, magenta, candy-striped. A carpet of colors so saturated and so dense that from a distance it doesn't look like a plant at all. It looks like someone laid fabric across your garden. That moment happens every single spring once creeping phlox establishes. And then it spends the rest of the year quietly, invisibly, doing exactly what every other plant on this list does. Suppressing weeds, covering soil, holding ground. Except it never goes brown, never goes dormant, never gives the weeds an opening. The plant itself grows barely 4 to 6 inches tall, low and tight against the ground, spreading outward in wide evergreen mats of needle-fine foliage. That texture is part of what makes it work so well as a weed suppressor. The leaves are dense enough that the mat has almost no porosity. Weed seeds landing on the surface find nothing. No soil contact, no light, no moisture. Established creeping phlox doesn't just compete with weeds. It makes the conditions they need functionally unavailable. It spreads about 2 feet per season under good conditions, steady and reliable, without the containment concerns of something like ivy. Each year the mats push outward a little further, filling more of the slope, covering more bare ground, closing more of the gaps that weeds have been exploiting. By year 3, a well-planted area of creeping phlox is essentially self-maintaining. You stop thinking about it. You just enjoy it. And then April comes and it stops you in your tracks all over again. It wants full sun. The more direct sun it gets, the more aggressively it blooms. It actually prefers poor, rocky, or sandy soil, which means the difficult spots most plants struggle in are exactly where creeping phlox is most at home. Slopes, rock gardens, along the edge of a driveway, spilling over a retaining wall, cascading down a terraced bed. It looks intentional everywhere it goes. Cold hardy down to zone 3. Drought tolerant once established. Essentially zero maintenance after the first season beyond a light trim after flowering to keep the mats compact. Here is what puts it at number 1 on this list above everything else we've covered today. Creeping phlox is evergreen in every zone where it's reliably hardy. That means while every other garden bed is sitting exposed through November, December, January, bare soil just waiting to be colonized, the creeping phlox bed is covered. Has been the whole time. Will be when spring arrives. The weeds that get a running start on your other beds every February never get that opportunity here. The mat is always closed. It also happens to be one of the finest pollinator plants you can grow in a low-maintenance garden. When it blooms, the flowers are loaded with nectar. Butterflies and native bees treat an established planting like a destination. You're not just solving a weed problem. You're creating something genuinely alive and thriving in a space that used to cost you hours of work every season. One planting, one decision. A yard that blooms dramatically every spring, holds its ground silently every other month of the year, and slowly makes the entire concept of weekend weeding feel like something that used to be your problem. Take a second and actually picture this. Not today, 6 months from now, maybe next spring. You walk outside on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, no agenda, nowhere to be. You look around your yard and the beds are full, covered edge to edge. Some of it is still green from winter. Some of it is just starting to show the first color of the season. And there is nothing pulling at you. No bare patch you've been avoiding. No mental note about the weeds along the fence. No guilt about the slope you haven't touched since fall. That is not an unrealistic outcome. That is exactly what happens when you stop trying to maintain bare soil and start filling it with plants that maintain themselves. Every plant in this countdown is doing the same fundamental thing. Taking away the conditions that weeds need to survive. Light, open ground, loose soil, uncontested space. Cover those with the right plant in the right location and the dynamic of your entire yard shifts. You stop reacting to problems and start watching a garden that slowly, season by season, closes itself in. The one thing that matters now is starting. Because ground covers need time. A season to establish, a second season to really spread, a third season to be completely self-sufficient. Every week you wait is another week the weeds are already building a root system in ground that the right plant could have claimed. The window for this season is open right now. It will not stay open indefinitely. Pick one spot. The one that frustrates you most. The bare slope, the shaded strip, the weedy edge that comes back every year without fail. Choose the plant from today that fits your conditions. Put it in the ground this season, and then do something genuinely radical. Leave it alone and let it work. Next week, I'm covering the biggest mistakes gardeners make when planting ground covers. The placement errors, the timing mistakes, the things that seem fine in year 1 and become genuine problems by year 3. If you've been thinking about planting any of the plants from today's video, you want to see that one before you buy anything. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And before you go, drop a comment below. Which plant from this list are you most seriously considering? And what's the spot in your yard that just will not quit? The one that weeds seem to find no matter what you do. Tell me what you're working with. I read every comment, and your situation might shape exactly what I cover next. I'll see you in the next one.